County Human Services and Public Health. Also, we'll have our webmaster here, Jamie, helping us as we go along as well. So tonight, just a little bit about Pacer Center. We were founded in 1977, and we're the Minnesota Parent Training and Information, PTI, that are mandated by the federal government in each state. And we're also a member of an 18 disability group coalition we collaborate with: the Down Syndrome Association, MCIL, ARC of Minnesota, and the Autism Society, just to name a few. So most of us that work at Pacer are parents, or we have family members of children and young adults with disabilities. And I always say that the beauty of Pacer is that most of us have been there. We're funded by government, state, and private grants, and also do fundraising. The housing project was funded by a small grant starting in 2003. We have a variety of programs in Pacer: Simon Technology Center, a National Center on Transition and Employment, just to name a few. We're going to go through a few housekeeping items right now, and we will be taking your questions via the questions feature we'll talk a little bit more about. Just a quick disclaimer that Pacer Center staff are not acting as attorneys or cannot give legal advice, and the contents herein are for information and educational purposes only. It's not legal advice. If you have those questions, you should contact an attorney. So again, we won't have time to get into a lot of individual situations. So we're going to ask you to put your questions in the Q&A tab on your Zoom navigation bar, and our webmaster, Jamie, myself, Jerry, and Sue will field those questions. If we don't get to all your specific questions tonight, we will be able to follow up with you, and we will have those questions all printed out for us at the end. Also, all materials are available through our download on our website. If you have barriers doing that and you'd like to receive a paper copy of some of our materials, you can email us at pacer@pacer.org. We also have a great transition to adulthood book called Mapping Dreams. And if you'd like to receive that or any of the tip sheets that we have tonight that are on our slide deck that accompany this presentation, you're welcome to do so. Just a note that our housing guidebook that used to be in print form is now all online, and we are updating those as we go. Another thing is, once the webinar ends, you'll have the ability to complete Pacer's workshop evaluation. In addition, the evaluation link will be sent by email about 24 hours after the workshop or tomorrow evening. Once you complete that evaluation, you can look for a second link for the certificate of attendance. And it's really super important that you respond to those. So I'd really suggest if you can do it tonight afterwards, we'd really appreciate it. Again, your input is what helps us when we write for grants, and also to help us change and adjust the content for future workshops. This housing project's been going since 2003, if you can believe it. And we've really retooled it over all these years, and it's been a direct result of your valuable evaluation data that you've sent us. With that, I just wanted to make a couple announcements here that we have some great workshops coming up. I'm not going to get into all that, but a very significant would be the Living, Learning, and Working After High School, which is coming up on May 13th. Which is going to be a mini conference on transition to adulthood. So I encourage you to go on our website and check that out. Also, several workshops through our Simon Technology Center that actually relate to independent living: meal planning and cooking tools, AAC apps for symbol and text-based. So really encourage you. We get so many calls of people needing that support, and sometimes have a gap with getting that information. And Pacer's really designed some really creative, great workshops for you to kind of just come in and get a sampling of some of what's available out there. Let's see, Jamie, did you have anything else you wanted to address about the evaluations or anything?
The only thing is the evaluation, it will be in that email, but also when people leave the webinar, the evaluation link will show immediately after you leave the webinar. And
Okay.
I think somebody asked about the length of it. We're scheduled to go till 9 p.m.
Right, and we are going to take a break about halfway through. I'll get to that and have a like 5-minute stretch break, but we do have a lot to cover tonight, and we're happy you're all here. So again, this is our 3-part housing workshop. This is the one that's going to give you the planning and the overview that we have. And the second one, 2 weeks from today, is going to be on the eligibility and funding. And then the third one, which is kind of one of our favorites, is our stories on options. And we've had quite a variety over the years. We'll talk a little bit more about who might be in that. And it's kind of important that you realize that this process takes time and you're not going to learn it all in a 3-part series. You'll need to network and do additional research and work to understand the information just as you had to do in the IEP process. And you may even need to come back to the workshop series again next year. Many people we know have done this because we continue to be in a significant time of systems change. And then there's ever-changing housing and services terminology. In addition to the challenges with the direct care workforce, lack of affordable, accessible housing, and changes in developments are happening every year. Just quickly, I mentioned that PACER has some housing publications that I usually, when callers call, I draw their attention to. We have our website that you welcome to look at, which has all the different sections on, how to get started, rights, services and supports, advocacy tips, and some of our past videos. In addition, we have several videos to get started, and then our tip sheets are very important. I find, in dealing with the education system, that we've had kind of a lack in the human services system to do similar things that we do for education, which are kind of, what are the basic advocacy tips? What is some of the terminology that's very important for you to know when advocating? And also tips to get started on housing. So this workshop is going to address why it's important to start thinking about housing and services now. Why are housing and services evolving? We're going to talk a little bit about Minnesota's Olmstead Plan and the Home and Community-Based Services Rule. We're also going to be going over person-centered thinking and planning, as well as how that process can provide information and direction for housing and services options. And then we will look at what are some of the housing options, do an overview again of some of the models that are out there through some of the stories that we've presented over the years. And again, my co-presenter tonight is Jerry Mellum. He's the Senior Planning Analyst with Hennepin County Human Services and Public Health Department. Jerry's worked with people with disabilities for 35 years. He's worked in group homes, day programs, been a guardian, and was an advocate at the ARC. It's Twin Cities, but now it's ARC Minnesota for about 8 years. And he provides ongoing community and staff training, supports, vocational services, housing, self-directed services, and provides information about county services to anyone who does not speak English. He's certified as a person-centered thinking training from the Learning Community on person-centered practices, and was chosen as the award winner from the Minnesota Department of Human Services and Board on Aging to promoting exemplary practices. So we want to know a little bit about what are some of the top reasons y'all came here tonight for the workshop, and we'd like you to send those through your Q&A feature. If you could do that, we're kind of going to look for some themes and talk with you a little bit about what we might be covering in the workshop here, if you'd like to do that.
Susan, this is Sue. Quick question.
Yeah.
Someone would like to know if the information and resources we provide will be applicable outside of Minnesota.
Yes, many of the concepts are federal, so they're required throughout the states. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Specific names of funding streams might be, specific to that state, but the concepts of, for example, a home and community-based labor are, available federally, but in the states, they might be called something else. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but thanks for that answer, or the question rather. So top reasons, everybody, that you came here tonight. We'd love to know. You seeing anything there, Sue?
Yes, I'm seeing that someone has 3 young adults needing housing, 18, 19, and 20. Someone else would like to learn about options and tips on finding a roommate.
Okay.
Looking for info on housing for their 22-year-old son who's autistic. Someone else came to get an overview about housing options and funding processes. We have a dad who has a 16-year-old son who's thinking ahead.
Great. So, as far as again, we're going to be addressing all this. We're going to be covering some of the things, some of the roommate and some of that, those issues as we get to the third workshop, when we delve a little bit more into the specific housing models and giving some examples throughout stories. You're in the right place if you want an overview of housing. Again, this is I feel like it's somewhat of a pretty comprehensive view. We don't know a lot of people that are doing this. And again, we're going to kind of point you toward the navigation chart here in a little bit so that you can get oriented in how to get started. But yeah, this workshop is designed for transition age. So we're looking anywhere from 14 to, through 22. However, when we started this project a long time ago, we realized that, there wasn't a lot out there. And so we do, give resources to people beyond that. We know a lot of times people aren't getting housing until they're into their 30s. So yes, you're in the right place tonight. So thanks for those questions. And again, we'll be getting to those as you go throughout the series. Anything else there, Sue?
Yes. I have to find it again. My child is a teen. It seems like we may need to apply to be on wait list. Can you apply before 18?
That's a good question. And
I think we'll be talking about that.
Yep.
A lot of folks who are seeking information, just getting started. One family has a 12-year-old. Another is concerned as she gets older. She wants to make sure her adult is situated with housing so that no one else will have to step in if something happens to her.
And those all are going to be discussion points, I would say, within that third workshop. I mean, that is, those are the top concerns for people, especially families that have young adults as they age. Is probably one of our number one calls as people get into their 60s and 70s. And some of us are in what they call, I guess, the sandwich generation, where we're taking care of our parents as well. So again, you've come to the right place, and we're going to go ahead and we'll be addressing that throughout the workshop series. So with
Susan,
that,
one last question, because I think it's awesome.
okay.
My son is 9. Is it too early?
Absolutely not. It's never too early to start talking about where you might want to live in the future as you're driving around in the neighborhoods and why. And we do have a lot of people contact us sometimes when they have children that have high needs. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to get those needs met in the family home and when you can actually access those funds for housing. So again, why is it important for you to start thinking of it now? And many of you are asking about that the IEP, if your son or daughter's on an individual education plan, they must consider independent living as part of the transition IEP. And you and your son are, your young adult, are experts about their strengths, gifts, and preferences. Again, housing options and supports do involve eligibility criteria, timelines, and waiting lists. And that's why we started this so early. And there's a limited available of affordable, accessible housing. And most important thing is that we think you'll want your young adult to get a life and a home and not just a place. And what do I mean by that? So again, your young adult will be coming out of the special ed system into the adult services world, and that provides services in the least restrictive environment that provide inclusion with their regular education peers. And they'll be entering an adult services world that is still largely based on segregated group settings and uses language that can sound institutional, like finding a placement, a bed, or living in a group home. So you're having to live in a group to get services. So Minnesota has done a lot of hard work to omit those stereotypes, change the language and terminology, and redesign the system to come in alignment with the federal directives that promote inclusion, a person's right to choose where and whom they want to live with, the home and community-based rule in Olmstead. And it's all imperative for us to use this new language and terminology so that we can be champions for our young adults, to not only educate them, but also those we interact with in our communities and beyond. So most of the parents that I talk to at Pacer want their young adults to have a home, and that when asked, provides that feeling of comfort, safety, and security. And they want their young adults to have housing that provides at a minimum some of the same quality living standards that they've been accustomed to in their current family home. They want their young adults to live a meaningful life and to be included in a community of belonging. But many times our callers might be focused on finding the place rather than creating that desirable life and home. So what is home to your young adult? What is it about home that comprise their rituals, their routines, their environment, the support from you in their current living arrangement, or others in their communities that might create that desirable life? Tonight, we're here to assist you to learn about some of those person-centered practices and tools that you and your young adult can start on your journey to achieve that vision. So again, it's very important for you to start educating yourself now so that you can be your best advocate for your young adults to live in that most integrated setting. And some of the words of wisdom that we've had from parents and young adults in the last 21 years of doing this is that don't look for a placement, focus on insisting your young adult to create a meaningful life, because nobody really lives in the same place forever. So we want to do what you can do to help your young adult live their best life today. So again, why is housing evolving? And parents and individuals with disabilities not only expect, but are demanding housing and services that are integrated and based on person-centered thinking principles. There's also the federal government's directive to implement the Olmstead decision, which we're going to talk about next. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services had a directive to implement what they call the home and community-based services rule. And there's also separating housing from services. Tonight, we really are in a historic systems change from the old institutional congregate group models to supportive housing models that provide a level of care your young adult needs in the integrated settings in the community. Integrated settings can be a variety of things, housing models like apartments, townhomes, single-family homes, duplex, co-op housing, with our people with disabilities. Again, our young adults have been accustomed to having inclusive education services in the least restrictive environment based on inclusion, yet they are entering that adult services world and want to be moving toward those person-centered thinking models. Again, Pacer's mission and vision is to support children and young adults with disabilities and their families have access to resources and equitable opportunities to be successful and valued members of their community. So we believe that the opportunity to partner with other families and communities, agencies, organizations to create new systems of housing and services based on our beliefs of inclusion, self-determination, and person-centered practices. Only then will we have access to appropriate housing and services, as well as the creation and development of affordable, accessible housing models. So, I am sorry, this is out of, that's out of order there, everybody. Sorry about that. So we're going to go to the Olmsted decision. So where have we come from? Some of you may have heard about the Olmsted decision, but basically it was a decision in 1999 that gave the right of people with disabilities to live in the community. And that was reinforced by the United States Supreme Court, Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson, who had wanted to receive services in the state of Georgia in the community instead of a psychiatric institution. And they argued that Georgia violated their right to services in the most integrated setting under the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So the court ruled that integration is fundamental to the purposes of ADA, and that states might be required to provide community-based services rather than institutional placement for individuals with disabilities. So the idea is that no matter where a person lives, services and support should be matched to that individual's needs based on the concept of living in the most integrated setting appropriate to meet their needs. This also applies to people that might be at risk of unnecessary institutionalization because of the lack of community-based housing and supportive services. So over the past 25 years, states have been kind of slow to embrace the new models for housing. And in recent years, the federal government directed federal agencies to vigorously enforce the civil rights of Americans with disabilities. The Department of Justice has made enforcement of Olmsted a top priority, and we have the link to their website that you may want to go to read about some of the cases that are have been discussed. So Minnesota has an Olmsted plan. The plan was developed from a very important class action lawsuit called the Jensen Settlement. December of 2011 was filed by a group of parents on behalf of their family members for the unnecessary restraint and seclusion in METO, which is the Minnesota Extended Treatment Options. And the settlement required Minnesota to convene a sub-cabinet to develop and implement a comprehensive plan for people with disabilities to have greater integration and inclusion. It sounds like some of our states don't have a plan like this. We've had other states talk with us after our workshop. So again, we can kind of direct you to some of those resources in your own state to inquire further. But Minnesota here has developed its vision that it'll be a place where people with disabilities are living, learning, and working and enjoying life in the most integrated setting. And some of the key aspects of the plan involve person-centered planning, housing and services, employment, lifelong learning and education. And these others listed here: transportation, healthcare and healthy living, positive supports, crisis services, assistive tech, preventing abuse and neglect, and community and engagement. And on your slide deck, I did include the Olmsted brochure. I highly encourage you to go online and check it out and get involved with the community engagement. There are different committees that you can be on, or even just to tell your story. They meet regularly. And again, we have the link to the office here that you can get further information. Along with the Olmsted decision, the home and community-based rule was created by the Centers of Medicaid that had directed all states to comply with this rule. So in 2014, again, CMS released new rules that created standards for home and community-based services. And the rule said that the people living in the U.S. receiving publicly paid long-term services and supports must receive those supports in the most integrated setting and have full access to the benefits of community living. So long-term services must be provided in the most integrated setting and have full access to the benefits of community living. In addition, it defines what the services in the settings are and are not, and it enhances the quality of home and community-based services that provide protections to the participants. In addition, when in the service planning for people, It must use a person-centered planning process that addresses health and long-term services and support needs, that reflects the individual's preferences, goals, and puts the person at the center. And this is why we're going to spend time tonight talking about that important information that you and your team need, and your young adults team needs to do. In addition, the legal definition of informed choice: a person and their legal representative are to make a voluntary decision after being informed about any and all available options for case management, services, and providers, and the information needs to be delivered using the person's primary method of communication and at a level that they can understand. So what does that mean? Basically, again, there's a list that the states had to go back and do a thing called an attestation process. So they had to submit the settings and make sure that they all came into compliance within a certain amount of time. In Minnesota, again, did come into compliance, I believe it was in February of 2019. And some of the key highlights of the home and community-based services rule when it applies to housing is that a person must have a lease in their own home that offered the same responsibilities and protections for evictions and appeals as the tenant-landlord law in their state, that the person has their own living, sleeping, bathing, and eating areas, that the person has privacy in their living or sleeping area and are free to decorate it as they choose. They're able to choose if they want a roommate and who they are. The individual controls his or her own schedule, including access to food at any time. The individual can have visitors at any time, and that the setting is physically accessible to the individual. And any modification to any of these need to be supported in the specified need and justified in the person-centered plan. So we're going to move on to the last bullet point too, why housing is evolving. And again, we're trying to separate housing from services. So before it would be, if you want to move into this setting, here's the package of services that we can offer you. And now in separating the actual housing where you're going to live from the services that you receive is the key issue. And we wanted to just mention tonight a little bit about what you might have been hearing on the news about Governor Walz's One Minnesota budget. I'm not an expert in this and policy, and I just wanted to give you a few highlights. We've provided some information on the slide deck that I think is very revealing, and a lot of our people don't, callers might not understand the, again, 2024 State of the State's housing profile with some of the key Minnesota findings and trends. Right now, we can go through a few of those, but basically just the overview is that, again, here in 2023, Governor Walz signed a $165 billion housing omnibus bill. It's the largest single investment in our housing state history, and other legislation brought in another $1.3 billion. And this was largely, again, through the work of a lot of people coming together for a long period of time. And the Homes for All Coalition, which is comprised of a statewide organization with advocates, individuals, their families, and cities and counties, to have a united effort to have a statewide investment in housing stability for all Minnesotans. So it's not separating that we have people that have homelessness or people that might need specific housing for veterans or who it might be. It is for all of us, and it's for people with disabilities. And quite frankly, people with disabilities haven't been at the table. Again, all housing and services, again, have been in that group congregate setting. When PACER first started its housing project here back in 2005, and I was doing some initial research and, come to find that many of the cities in their strategic plans might not have people with disabilities identified. It would be seniors and or other groups that would be identified. And so really, as a result of people in our disability community, some of the top people again would be ARCA Minnesota, Lutheran Social Services, started to get involved. I just talked with Gene Martinez recently, and he talked a little bit about joining with ARC, joining them in 2020 to really educate them on the needs and orient them toward the needs of people with disabilities. And so as a result of doing that really incredible work, this is what it's produced, is the ability to have this funding now to have everybody on the same page. And so the Homes for All Coalition, I do encourage you to look at that flyer. It does talk about some of the top needs and some of the top concerns that we all have. We know though that, I think in the trends report and some of the things I've learned over the year, that you'd be surprised to find that again, our teachers, our firefighters, our workers, our direct care workforce shortage. I mean, people that aren't making enough to really afford the median priced home, which is $98,580 right now. And the income needed to afford a 2-bedroom apartment is $46,616. So that's way over what a lot of our people in home health care, retail, cashiers, fast food, and a lot of our service industries. Again, you can look the home ownership gap between white and Black homeowners. The stats on here are really, really eye-opening, and I don't know how many of you have been kind of, that's been on your radar at all. But again, it does going to affect our population, and so I'm not going to go through all that, but I'd wanted to put that out there for you to look at, so that we try to kind of put that in context of why it's so hard to find housing right now. But I think the great part about all this is that we have all come together, and we'll come through a little bit later. I wanted to talk about our links to kind of just doing some advocacy work on your own. And I don't know how many of you have been able to reach out to your legislators or ever got involved in advocacy efforts through some of our other partner organizations. And so we do have a link to ARC's Advocacy Toolkit that I really encourage you to look at. Those pages really are nice. You can work with your young adult to outline and share your story. Tell a little bit about what it is that affects you, what the issue or problem is, the solution, or what you might be wanting, and then thanking your legislator. We've got a lot of great stories throughout the years, and one that we've personally done with our family and my young adult with a disability in attending Disability Day put on by the Consortiums with Citizens for Disabilities. They just recently had that. And growing for the first time, making our appointment with our legislator, we got to know them. And it was cool because over the years, they would be able to meet with my son. They had never really met somebody that had autism spectrum before. So we could educate them on the needs throughout his lifetime. And as he reached into transition and the issues he might be having with employment and, accessing affordable, accessible housing with supports. And they've been able to, really personalize that, been able to pass on bills that they might be able to support. So, I think it's up to all of us. We're all so stretched, but you can really feel that empowerment and empower your young adult with disabilities to be able to follow up with that. So there's 2 links, I would tell you to contact. And if you went to the ARCA Minnesota site and looked at the Capital Connectors newsletter, so they meet every month and they are discussing issues that are on the agenda. The CDCS budgets versus traditional budgets will be up next, discussing on some of the differences between those two. And then they do some training as well. So that would be one way to really stay abreast. the others is contacting the Homes for All Minnesota organization and being able to just talk with them about ways, because they're always looking for stories again. And so again, then if we look at our housing navigation chart that we're going to be using throughout the process here that I first told you about in the beginning. If we look toward our back page, and again, I'm kind of jumping forward here, but we're talking a little bit about some of the funding streams that have come down as a result of some of the that need to be that have come about from the funding that have been given that are required. So I know we've had a lot of people ask about that. So again, talking a little bit about where the initial monies come from in housing development and capital programs, the Consolidated Housing and Community Development Plan, the 3 agencies that oversee those required plans, DEED, Department of Economic and Employment, and Minnesota Housing, and Minnesota Department of Human Services. So I'm not going to get into all the complexity of that right now, but it does kind of give you an overview and some of the links to look at some of those larger funding streams, how they come down, and how now under the new community initiative programs, there's going to be new grants available that will help people with disabilities. So one of the reports, in order to put this up on the table for legislators, were these 7 key housing needs that were developed. And again, we know there's a severe shortage of housing that's affordable, and that during the Great Recession, Minnesota unproduced housing, which created a shortage and drove up rents and home prices. We're falling short of producing enough new housing that's affordable. We have a large stock of affordable housing that needs to be preserved, and that we know homelessness is most egregious form of housing instability and has been a persistent problem. We all are becoming in Minnesota more racially and ethnically diverse, so we have housing disparities. And then also the aging baby boom generation is causing housing needs and challenges. And I encourage you, if you'd like to look at that report and get more information. So right now with the budget bill summary, these are some of the numbers that have been put aside for preserving and creating new homes, stability, strengthening home ownership, and other housing investments. And so we're looking at these key bullet points here on rental and home ownership. We haven't talked a ton about home ownership in our workshops, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. New construction and preservation. Again, we're losing so many units per month, and again, we have big corporations maybe coming in and buying things and then renovating it, raising costs, so it's making it hard for that moderate homeowner to keep their housing. We need to look at deeply affordable housing and market rate housing. Again, homeless prevention and ownership, and rental assistance and down payment assistance. Rental assistance has been a huge one because of COVID, and a lot of those funds now not there anymore. However, there are some new ones being proposed, like the Bring It Home Minnesota rental subsidy. So with that, again, we're looking and reframing about the way that we think about housing. And so again, we say a person's own home isn't a program. It's not an open bed or a placement. It's not a specific model. It's not a development. Everybody, I kind of hate the term independent living, because again, independence is the services and support to enable your young adult to live in the most integrated setting. It's interdependent. So we say you don't have to have a certain level of independence to be in housing. It's a choice, a process. One person at a time. And it's individualized, person-centered, collaboration, and we would say the right supports at the right time. So we need to challenge and join together to be able to rediscover new ways to meet health and safety, as well as taking risk. We're matching services and supports to the person where they live. And we're looking at ways to share information on housing and services and supports from parents, what's working, not working, resource maps, and also working with people that are doing a lot more with housing navigation. So with that, I'm going to move on to what is person-centered thinking and planning? Again,
Susan and Jerry,
Yep.
before we switch speakers, this is Sue with Pacer. Just a couple of questions. What if your young adult wants to live in the community with their friends with autism, for example, is one, and would a family pursue housing first or services first?
I can start. I think the hardest thing is to find the housemate or the roommate. So if you found the roommate, that's step one. That's really important. And then a person-centered plan, talking about where you want to live, how you afford housing, what kind of support you'll need will be really important. It's an ongoing process. Like Sue said, things evolve and change all the time. So you have a good understanding one year that might evolve in the future. Finding out what you can do, what's possible and what's maybe not possible within your vision. Working individually with the county or your case manager or PACER to kind of figure that out, to kind of help you down that road, and hopefully we'll be answering those questions. So it is possible to live with your friends and with disabilities, without disabilities, that can happen. Yes, it's just figuring out what's the best support for that group of people or for that person.
Right, and I think we're going to talk, that's going to be in our third workshop. We're going to revisit the story of young adults who worked with a developer to secure some tax credit units, and then they're going to give us our update, not all with ASD, but with various developmental disabilities. So we've got a lot of other stories too on our slide decks from before, so I can actually point you toward those and when we're done here. But again, to get on with the person-centered thinking and planning, again, I want you to draw your attention. Again, I kind of jump forward on the navigation chart. So we developed this quite a long time ago, really to just kind of give you some of those steps on what should be coming first and second, as we got a lot of calls from people saying, you know, gosh, I can get a waiver if I move into this place. You know, we're like, well, probably not. That's not the way it should be working. It might work like that, but you know, somebody might tell you that, but this is really how the flow should be. So again, I'd like you to go ahead and pull this out. We have this available. It's in the slide deck there. And so we're going to start again with, you know, what's your young adult's vision for community living? And so with person-centered planning, it refers to thinking and planning that can be used in our everyday interactions with people to discover who they are as a whole person and what really matters to them in their life. It focuses on the outcomes, dreams, and visions of the person. It's not a system-centered process driven by programs, stereotypes, or segregated programs like traditional models. It's a set of tools that addresses what is important to and for the person to have a quality life, and is essential to give people more choice and control about how they're supported. It gathers information from people who are important to the person and to who knows them best: family, friends, neighbors, support workers, and professionals. It can also identify interests, preferences, and desired outcomes, identify supports and how to best support a person, and aid in the process of developing self-determination for your young adult. And also team members to share a vision about who that person is and their goals and priorities. It's required by law in the 245D licensing that specifies the outcomes that will be in your plan. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as foundational planning when we go through the workshop. But again, I think we keep stressing that this isn't about getting a place. So it's about getting a life. and a home and not just a place. And our parents and everybody will tell you that as you listen tonight. So, and again, it's a way of thinking about what do we know before we jump to what we want to do. And we believe that the more time you spend on defining these issues, the more effective the solution. So again, we're going to be going up over some of the person-centered thinking tools, rituals and routines, what is working and not working, and what doesn't make sense. Those are key terms. And going to have Jerry join us now. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those rituals and tools that guide us in our days, what those are that provide consistency, comfort, control, and have a few of you kind of popcorn in some of the things you can think about. So, Jerry, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm really happy to be here tonight. Thank you for the invite again this year. I'm really fortunate that through the years, I've met hundreds of families and I have hundreds of stories to tell about housing. I'm a person-centered planning, certified person-centered planning trainer, and I do train Hennepin County staff, and that's been really exciting as well. One of the things we talk about is what are your rituals and routines? What's your morning routine? What's it like when you wake up in the morning? How many people here are jump out of the bed, grab your coffee, run around the lake, come back kind of people, and how many people want to sleep in until maybe 10 or so? How many people might have their birthday be a national holiday? They're really excited about that. They kind of drop the hint a couple months before, December is my birthday coming up. It's before Christmas, but it's in December, just letting you know, and then make it a big event during that time. Some people have vacation routines where they go to the same place over and over because they really love that part of the country. I know I've got some friends that go to the Southwest, the desert Southwest, and they go camping and hiking. And I love the Grand Canyon. I go there and show other people that many, many times. So one of the keys when you're looking for a housemate or you're looking for a place to live is thinking about what rituals and routines did you have at home that gave you comfort, and how can you continue those rituals and routines in your new environment with maybe a housemate or other people, and not just forget about those. If you're a person that likes to wake up later in the day, you're going to move to a place that you can wake up later in the day. Or if you're a person that needs a certain blanket when you're sick, maybe taking that blanket with you. So those are all kinds of things to think about for rituals and routines. The fun part about person-centered planning is that we're developing language and vocabulary for people to use. And so providers now, when you say, do you have an opening in your home? They say, well, can I have a copy of your person-centered plan? And we'll come over and we'll do a morning routine exercise with your housemates to see how they might fit. And so those are some things that are happening as a result of person-centered planning.
So do we have a few from the audience that you can think of? A few rituals and routines that are kind of make or break. They can make or break a person's day, and especially for some of our kids with disabilities, if they have their routines, we know that if those aren't honored, it might not be a good day.
Mm-hmm.
And how to pass that among, various staff that they're working with. And that's what's so important about creating these plans for training documents. But yeah, anybody out there? A few?
Susan, just so people know, we closed the chat so they can use the Q&A panel to enter any information. Somebody did say special diet, gluten-free.
Oh, yes. One that's near and dear to our hearts as well. Yes, that's really huge. And it's also important for a person, not only to the person as well. So yeah. Any others in the day that you can think of that help get your son or daughter out the door if they need to get out, or young adult rather, sorry.
Or holidays. Some people celebrate holidays. Some people celebrate other different holidays. And so what makes you feel grounded to your family, grounded to your culture, grounded to the way you were brought up? Just things to think about. We're not just moving into a place and make sure that the lights are working, right? Or the fridge is working. It's more than that. We're creating a home by looking at rituals and routines that people bring with them.
I see somebody saying their son has to have his desktop computer. Again, are there specific times for that? Is that that he absolutely needs that, maybe for organization or just to wind down or as a transitional activity for him? Technology access, it says. I see some others. Our daughter likes to connect with everyone because she knows how to chat. So again, so that sounds like some of those rituals and routines. Late sleeper, that's going to be huge if you've got staff coming in and they're used to getting somebody up and they're not ready to get up, and then can be, a big power struggle. So we need to have that written down on what those issues are. Yep. Let's see. Ride horses, play cards after dinner. The nephew must visit with cats. And so a lot of those. So, and that's again, our young adults get a big stack of paperwork. We're going to go through the profile. I probably should wait till we get to that page. But this is the tools that are going to be they're the real important training documents. And a lot of this is embedded in the Minnesota's MinChoices assessment and how they do the support plan. But again, the plans can look really different. So I'm already skipping way ahead here. Jerry, yeah, go ahead.
So talking about what's working and what's not working, if you looked at that one page, if you looked at that morning routine, what would happen if I gave you my morning routine? If I'm a get up in the morning early, go run around the lake and come back and work person, I gave that to you and you're a sleep late person, that probably wouldn't work very well. So we talk about things that are working and things that are not working. This tool is comparing columns from the person's perspective, from the parent's perspective, from the staff's perspective, from other people's perspective. And as long as the two columns agree, what's working, what's not working, we're great. And when it's not in agreement, we have to kind of dig deeper. We have to unpeel the onion. We have to ask more questions about how can we make this work better? How can we make this accommodation? How can we make this a win-win for most people? It's a simple way to kind of problem solve. It's a simple way to kind of talk through a situation and look at it from each person's perspective. You'll be able to share equally. Just because I'm a PhD psychologist and I have a doctorate degree, et cetera, my input isn't more than your input. And so I'm not a PhD or doctor, by the way, but my input is not more than yours. It's equal input, shared equally. So it's a nice tool. These are types of person-centered planning tools. There are many options. Some are more abstract, some are more concrete. So a couple of the slides previous, you saw an example of a path. A path is an example where you think maybe 5 years from now, if you have unlimited money, what's your vision for how you're going to live? And we're going to put that down about a vision, a possibility, and then we take a step back. What's possible? What's probable? And then we start saying, what about 1 year from now, 2 years from now? And then we start saying, well, what do you need to do today to start for tomorrow? That's one I don't really like, because I always want to put it off till next week. But that one says, really, what do you need to do today to start tomorrow, right? I want to start eating less next week, and then I'll kind of get into it.
I don't know, Jerry, I like this one. We've done this one a lot. I like this because you start out with like, what's going to happen in the next months, so many months down. And so again, we can show the big vision, and we're going to be showing that in workshop number 3. I love it because it's very visual, and it's really helpful for a lot of our kids to see, to go from point A to point C, you got to do these other steps, especially when our young adults want to like be down here and do all this. Well, there's steps and here's the visual steps that you have to go through.
Right. So, there's facilitators that you hire that are certified, that are experienced, that are experts in all these types of tools. A nice part is you bring your friends and your neighbors and staff and people that are really supportive of the person, and they take a little piece of the plan when they leave, so it's not all on your shoulders. We put goals and objectives in there, and we give a little piece of that to everybody in the team. When we talk about maps, it's like pieces of paper. The first piece of paper is maybe the person's history. we draw a squiggly line. The next piece of paper might be challenges. So that might be graphically recorded in dark colors and dark kinds of representations. The next one might be opportunities. So that might be really light, joyful colors. And then other maps, other little pieces of the person's life representing them. And again, then we get to a goal area. So each of these, essential lives planning, personal futures planning, circles of support, Liberty Plan, charting the life course are a little bit different, but they all have an objective of creatively and strategically talking about a person's plan, about their life, a goal. Each one has to have a goal. So maybe it's going to be housing or something like that.
Right. And so we're going to talk a little bit now more about how to use that thinking to start your housing plan. And go ahead, Jerry, with that.
Right. So this is a one-page description or a one-page profile. It's termed two different ways. Some people call it a profile. Some people call it a description. The key is that it has to have a theme or a focus, like maybe housing or finding a job, or maybe finding a day service, etc. There's some key statements in this one-page description. What's important to the person? What's important for the person? What do people like and admire about the person? We don't get to talk about that very much. We don't get to talk about, well, we talk a lot to Sue about what we like and admire about her, but most people don't get a lot of that input. And so what do people like and admire about the person? What is it? They're patient, they're kind, they're quiet, they're talented, they're all these things. How do you best support the person if they're not a morning person? How do you best support the person if they're a wake up and jump out of bed person? That's all in the one-page description. And then a picture of the person doing something engaging. So it's not just a person sitting there not engaged, or a person with a disability. It's a person fishing. It's a person riding their bike. It's a person caring for young kids. It's a person involving karate. You'll see that in a little bit. It's a helpful tool of introduction to providers that you're going to work with, to the staff you might work with, as a quick little snapshot, a quick little resume about the person and what's important. Parts of the United States, Ohio has one-page descriptions on the front of all of their records. Great Britain has one-page description on the top of all of their hospital records as well. So it's used universally in different kind of places. So we'll have some examples.
And in their education system, Jerry.
And in their education system.
And I say that, again, Helen Sanderson out in the UK is really the person that developed that idea. And she's part of the international learning community for person-centered practices. So I really encourage you. We have her links up on our PACERS website under the person-centered thinking and planning box. We also have a great little video on what a path is that actually is an animation that you can check out. So one of the things that PACER usually we recommend as one of the first steps is to create this profile or this description with your young adult. We have the template that's online. It's part of the slide deck. There's a great little sheet on exactly how to, go through the questions. Again, it's not just, it's the specifics about it too. So there's ritual, routines, pace of life, people they like to be with in the relationships. So, and it's just not like, they're, one descriptive word. I think people can get into more descriptions about that specific person. I know at part of the process that when we sent this out, when my son did it, it was really cool that we sent these questions out to the people that were going to be attending the meeting. And I was just so floored and really touched by a lot of the different answers on what people liked and admired. And it's such an amazing, confidence builder, and again, putting that person at the center. So we really support that. This is a really major document that we really encourage you to use for case managers, doctors. I could tell stories about, in the hospital and be able to put this up, and people could come up and say, who did this? And we're like, we did this. And it was great because then they had all that information sitting right up there for a person in the hospital that was, individualized to them. So anyway, there's actually, we kind of went through this, Jerry, the appreciations. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I should have
But
forwarded
no,
this. You
it's so
talked
important.
about it. Yeah, here's some examples,
I love that, to capture the person's spirit. That's what you're really
Yeah.
doing. A picture
Yep.
says 1,000 words, right? You see a picture of somebody doing something that you like to do, and there's a connection there as well, and you want to help them out or participate or be their friend or hang out with them because they have similar interests. That's how we all make friends, is look at our commonalities as well. So
Right. And then this is the important to section, which you kind of went over here.
these are all important things. We all want to be content. We want to be satisfied, comforted, fulfilled, and happy. We all want to have friends. Most of us want to have work. And these are normal things. We want to have a purpose in life. We want to feel fulfilled and meaningful. Having a boyfriend, having a girlfriend, places to go, not just staying home all the time. Making sure that you're brushing your teeth with warm water every day because your teeth are sensitive, or just coming home late at night because you're just a night person. My mom is a night person. She gets up early in the morning and she goes to bed late at night. She doesn't need a lot of sleep. So having status and control, having that little badge that you have sometimes at work that opens doors can be really important. Some people, there's some really fun stories about that. And just possessions and things to have are really important as well. So it's things that are important to the person or for the person. We're really good at determining what's important for the person, right? Drink 8 glasses of water, eat your vegetables, eat your fruit, go to bed early, all those things we've heard about over and over again that are really important, but we can't just have that. We have to have a balance. So important things are issues of health and safety and that are necessary to help the person, preventing illness, promoting wellness, having a safe environment, living in a place that you feel like you can go out at nighttime, you're physical and emotionally balanced, and having to be free from fear. We're really good at determining what's for the person, but we have to have a balance between what's important for the person and what's important to the person.
There we go. Back there.
Yeah. So
we can talk the supports first and then, yeah, that balance.
Sure. So, we need that balance. I like potato chips and I buy them every once in a while, but it doesn't mean I can have a case of potato chips. It doesn't mean I can eat a bag of potato chips. It doesn't mean I can eat many handfuls of potato chips. I can have them once in a while because I know if I have many, I'll get sick, I'll gain weight, I'll probably be unhealthy, etc. So what's that balance? How many of, a good question for the group is how many people have a perfect balance in their life right now? And all the hands go up, right? No, I wouldn't expect all the hands to go up, but I would expect that many of us are every day, we're kind of working towards that balance of what's important to us, what's important for us. And we make compromises in that maybe to help other people, or sometimes we travel long distances for our job, etc. And on the one-page description, we want to put what's important for the person as well. And so to be valued, to have friends, to be recognized in the community. I have a friend I volunteer with. His name is Dale. He lives in a group home. He's been my friend since 1987. He calls me every day. I wait for that call. The call is really short. It's 5 minutes or less. He talks about my mom, my relatives, etc. If I'd missed that call or if I didn't hear from him, I would miss it. So he is certainly valued in my life and valued in the community because he does this for other people as well. How to support the person.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What do they need to know? What's helpful? What's not helpful? Matching characteristics when you're looking for a housemate. Again, if you are having a roommate that's a rock and roll star and you're a quiet person that likes ballet, maybe that's not the best match. And so what are the matching characteristics of the staff that you have to work with? What are the matching characteristics of the people you're going to live with and or work with? We have more control about people we're going to live with than we work with, I guess. What is helpful for the person? So I mentioned I volunteer with a person. I've actually volunteered with 3 people and put a lot of time into volunteering with those 3 people. As a county planner, I can't throw the starfish back in the water. I can't throw all the starfish back in the water. I can't individually help everybody, although I can help a lot of people, but I've invested in helping 3 people, and Brian is one of those people. So Brian, you can see, is in the process of breaking 3 bricks. Brian has a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo, and he's really proud of that. He's a very involved person in his Taekwondo community. Can you go back a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So his description, what do people like and admire about him? He's motivated to be more independent. He's really becoming more independent. He's a problem solver. He's great with technology. He fixes people's phones when they're breaking. He knows about cars. When there's a car that goes by, he knows how many, what the motor type is, how big it is, the type of car, etc. And he has a plan for the future. So that's good. How to best support him? He wants to know what's happening. He doesn't want surprises. He doesn't want to just be picked up and taken to a doctor's appointment. Of course, we don't either, right? But he wants to know what's happening ahead of time. We don't want to be bossy. He doesn't want to have bossy people. He wants to understand that he's not mad when he's speaking loud. He's just being more assertive, or he's really feeling stronger about something. And he wants his staff to show up on time. He really gets tired of waiting, like we all do, I guess. What's important for him? Being treated respectfully. He's had a life of people not treating him respectfully. So he really, really wants people to treat him respectfully. Knowing what's happening next, riding his electronic bikes, having people know about his complex medical issues. He had spine surgery about a year ago, and that's really given him some complications. And his birthday. His birthday is a celebration. It is a holiday. He's going to let you know about 6 months ahead of time. It's my birthday. And he goes to Red Lobster and he always orders 2 lobster tails. And he loves scary movies. Some of the staff he has don't like scary movies, but he really wants to find a person who likes scary movies to go to the movies with him. So that's a little bit about Brian.
Oh, let's see. I'm having trouble advancing, Jamie, for some reason.
Click somewhere in the PowerPoint and then that activates the PowerPoint. There you
There we
go.
go.
Yeah, and Jerry, we're running a little late here, so we're going to try to move through it here.
So a communication chart sometimes is for people who don't use words to communicate. It can be used for that, where you're describing the behavior or what people should react as a part of the behavior. But you can use it for other things too. So an example, what's happening? The person does, this is what we think it means, and this is what we should do. So an example is Brian looks frustrated and sad. Brian says, nobody understands me. We think it means Brian is having difficulty solving a problem. We should assure him that we're listening and want to help. The bottom one, I think, is a little tough sometimes too. The apartment manager, knock on Brian's door. There's a typo there. Sorry. They knock on his door. They come in immediately because there's water dripping in the basement garage from his bathroom. Brian lets them in, but begins yelling at them because he feels that they should have given him a notice. He doesn't understand, and he calls the police. He's like really reacting. You need to give me 24 hours notice. He's not understanding. So he values his privacy. We think it means he values his privacy very much because previous experiences with his family, which are really rough. His dad didn't let him cook until 8 o'clock at night. When he got home, he couldn't make a mess during the day. All these rules. And we should tell the apartment staff to at least give a quick phone call, even if it's an emergency, that you have to come into the apartment and talk through that with them ahead of time. So it's not a big surprise when people knock on the door and have to come in and address the water issues. So all things we can work better with people once we know how to react. And these are good ways to write things down for people too. So we don't have to learn them again and again and again. We can learn them once and have it written down.
Right. And I would say this is a key training tool for people that communicate with behavior that might lack the ability to do so with their words. And we do have a great handout on how to complete the communication chart. So I really encourage you all to look at that. Another profile we have here was done quite some time ago, but I thought this was really fun. It was very creative that they put this together in a very visual way to show all of his favorite things in a little, graphic illustration here. Again, you have that on your slide deck, so I don't need to go through there, but this was Chris, who lives in his own townhome, and this was what he developed with his one of his staff. And then just a little bit about building some of your support networks. And again, I think we show over and over that you're going to hear throughout our stories that it's always about who you just happen to talk to. The people that you talk to now could be future roommates, later, acquaintances, whatever. It is all about networking. So want to talk a little bit about some of those support networks, Jerry.
Right. There was a question about how do I find a housemate or a roommate, and this is kind of addressing that question. When you go have coffee at Starbucks, if you go there the same time every day, you see the same people, maybe you see what kind of coffee they like, etc. They see you. So after time, you might say hi to somebody, and you might develop a friendship just because you're going to the same place, or you're going bowling the same night, or you're doing some other activity at the same place, or going to a restaurant. So these are all important things. The volunteers, your coworkers, acquaintances, family, friends, these are all networks that you can tap into. It's almost like finding a job. You're looking for a housemate. Like I mentioned, finding a housemate takes the longest time. So once you do that, you're on a roll to kind of move through that.
Oh, Jerry, I would also say very strongly that leisure recreation, I mean, it's huge. Again, it's your hobbies, what you love to do, what you're passionate about. So many times we find, again, a lot of people have met through Special Olympics, so time and time again, that sporting, but there's also so many things out there like meetup groups and, groups that you might be in your own area. But again, I think the more that we start to connect with our young adults in those areas around what they love to do, just going out, concerts, events, community events, swimming, going to the beach, all that stuff, you get to know each other, and pretty soon, I mean, that is really how that can start to work versus like we got to go advertise for a specific roommate. So I guess I'm a big believer in trying to build those connections in your community, and it's not easy sometimes. I would just say our experience again has been with some of the concerts and things, because we really love music. We're really starting to see a lot of the same people with parents showing up, and we start to talk, and we're in this similar areas in the metro, and so that's really been some really cool ways that we've been able to connect, and that I see other people connecting.
Right. Brian had a circle of chairs in his courtyard in his apartment where the guys in the building used to get together at night and talk and chat. And then one day I drove by and his chair was there, which is so exciting. And so he has a black belt in karate. He started to tell these buddies, these guys, about the moves, about all those pseudo blocks, et cetera, et cetera. And pretty soon he had people coming over to his house. He was giving lessons, and he had natural friends as a result of that. So things can really happen when you make connections.
Right. And I think also through our faith communities as well. That's a huge area that where people are recognized, and some of the different initiatives through faith organizations. Some are national, and some, so that's another idea as well.
So more community inclusion strategies. We talked a lot about those.
Yeah.
Volunteering, I think, is really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Getting on a mailing list of different community agencies, the community education groups in Robbinsdale, the southern suburbs, Minneapolis as well, meeting other people with shared interests. I think we talk a lot about this. Getting to know your neighbors, bring a pie over to the neighbors. It sounds kind of corny, but it really works. There was a group home in a urban area. They brought food over to the neighbors, and they said, well, our dog needs some exercises. Would you like to walk our dog sometime? And then they ended up taking to church and walking the dog, and there were some really good relationships that developed from there.
So with that, we're about a little over halfway, and I know we want to keep going here because we got a lot to cover, but it's an opportunity to just do a quick stretch break for everybody. If you'd like to, we'll just put it on hold here for a few minutes to do that, and then we'll get started on the second half of the workshop, which we're going to talk about the housing option overview.
So how many minutes?
2 to 3 minutes. How about that?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Susan and Jerry, there are a couple of questions.
Yeah, I'll be
So
happy
if
to
you
answer some
wanna,
questions.
Okay.
if you
I will
wanna
be right back.
lead in with those.
Thank you.
Sue, do you want to pick out the questions?
Yeah, I'm looking down some of them. Yeah. Looking at the one about a group roommates. Yeah, somebody talking about challenges with somebody that has mental health that don't think they need the supports. These are kind of a lot bigger issues. I want to make sure that we get to the overview part here, but I have a few thoughts on that, Jerry.
Right.
Hi,
I have a few
everybody. I
thoughts
think
also.
we're gonna, sorry, I don't know, can't see y'all out there, so hopefully you got a chance to just take a quick stretch, use the restroom or whatever. We're gonna go ahead and start back here. Again, a lot of these, it's hard for me to track right now while I'm speaking, so we're gonna make sure we kind of get back to you on some of these. You're not finding places for adaptive activities, definitely give me an email. There's some fantastic things through the Park and Rec system, and if they're required to get federal funding, then they're required to provide inclusion services. So there should be things through your Park and Rec departments in your communities, lots of things there. And then somebody's asking, how do you help somebody plan for services and supports if they have a mental impairment and don't think that they need those? They don't have a legal guardian, but their parents passed away and they were really never taught to be independent, but they're making a lot of missteps and need that support. And that is a call we get quite frequently. Again, I am really a big proponent in trying to, I don't know if that person's working with any outside supports like counseling or coaching, or if there's any way to get them into that system, and or again, approaching that person through their interests, right? I really think, kind of that coaching, mentoring, and then the person-centered facilitation just is, how to kind of approach that is to kind of, are there things, are you happy with things right now? How are you thinking about your plans? Like what's happening right now? What's working, not working with it? You want to, would you like to be open to learning more about maybe ways we could be thinking, doing some problem solving? Not so much that you have a disability, therefore we need to fix this and we think you need all these, you know what I mean? So again, approaching it
Yeah.
through that and putting
I
that
was
person
just
at
I was
the
just
center.
in a meeting where the parent is on hospice, which is unfortunate, and they're making plans for their son, and they invited 4 or 5 of their friends to be part of his long-term team. So we were just there, and we shared our phone numbers and email addresses and all those things, and hope to be a partner with him for a long time.
Yeah, and I think too, again, I know as a parent and from many parents that call, that our young adults can lock in with us, right? And so those natural supports, the people around them, floating the things that you need help with your natural supports or any family members, just all of a sudden kind of talking about the issue. It's not coming from you directly, but maybe from that other support person, and maybe they're hearing it from this person and that person, and whatever. And to kind of, and that's where that whole circles of supports come in, that I think is a really nice visual of trying to surround that person with various people, thinking about who those people are that you might be able to access. And what if natural supports and supports are limited or non-existent? Immediate family, well, that's where, we could ideate a little bit, and that's really what happens in that person-centered planning process, I think. Again, it's things that you think, maybe an acquaintance. I know I've got several examples of somebody we happen to know that I knew that was a big music lover and did some massage for us at one point and ended up inviting him. And then he was a whole conduit kind of into the music world for us. It was really, really cool. So that's the beauty of persons when you're going through the process, to look at people that might enlist to help that you might not think. And then as far as group meetups, having parents like 18 to 23 for possible roommates. Yeah, I don't think, again, part of the issue that, that's been discussed over the years with the various organizations is like not being able to endorse specific roommates, because there's been some issues around, people wanting to actually be responsible for that, but to open up opportunities for that. There are a lot of Facebook pages out there where they're just for information, but we're going to talk a little bit about that in the third workshop. So I'm going to kind of table that one. But
and you have over 100 people here tonight, so maybe they can send you an email and say,
yeah, and when we were in person, what I used to do is say to everybody, go back and create your profiles, and on workshop number 2, come on in and bring them up and put them up on the wall. And it was really cool because people could go around and kind of see those things and say, hey, yeah, maybe that person might, have some common interests that might want to do some stuff. So again, hanging out, getting to know people, that's kind of in so we can, again, talk more about that. But I want to launch into the housing options here, Jerry. Again,
Susan and Jerry, this is Sue, and I just have a quick resource I want to share with folks.
Yeah.
Reach for Resources.
Yep.
Is a community. They provide lots of different things. They're located over on the western side of the metro, St. Louis Park area. Tomorrow they are having their very first roommate social.
I saw that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Good.
And so you can, if you want more information about that, you can go to their website, which is resources.org. Tomorrow's the first one. I believe they have more planned for later in the year.
Right. And I'm also going to say too, some of the things that you might not know about is, again, the park and rec system. They've got fantastic opportunities. There's a thing called a Disability Pass Plus through Three Rivers Park. I highly encourage you to look at it and look at, groups that your young adult can attend with supports that are not for disabled people. There are adaptive fishing and paddling and biking and all sorts of really cool things. Once you apply for that pass and you have the eligibility, it can give you access to free rentals, paddle boat, canoes, getting into the regional park, the swimming places. And so just a lot of really cool resources. There's concerts, there's events, their family. They've got a whole section for homeschooling. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I think I've been just so incredibly impressed with the team of people out there and the people that we've worked with our son. just people that are going for environmental science, people that are in the park system, people that are retirees, all sorts of people that are really into being outside and just loving the outdoors and being able to share that. It's just been amazing. And that's really a great network. So again, with just recapping again, why is housing evolving? We covered some of these issues that people are demanding more housing based on person-centered principles, the federal government's directive for Olmstead, the home and community-based rule, and separating housing from services. And so with that, if you look at kind of your housing navigation chart right on that cover there, these aren't the exact questions, but again, they are very similar. And this is kind of Jerry's mantra in all the years I've known him. You got to start with, again, housing.
These are my secrets.
Well, the other thing is, just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to qualify for specific housing. You have to meet the eligibility criteria set out by the state. And we'll be getting into that more with the second workshop. But take it away, Jerry.
Sure. When I meet with hundreds of people, I ask them these 3 questions. I used to cross my fingers and have my arms behind my back because there wasn't a lot of variety, or there weren't a lot of options in housing like they are now. Now I can keep my fingers uncrossed and I can truly say, where do you want to live? I want to live downtown Minneapolis on the 40th floor of a spanning condominium with a nice balcony, but I'm living in New Hope with a 2-bedroom and a nice garage. And so we also have to have compromises where we're going to live. We can't just live, wherever we want. That's normal, right? For everybody. How will you pay for rent and food? So in this conversation, you would tell me, is a person open to Social Security? Do they have a job? And we would tell you about funding, like we're Minnesota Housing Assistance, housing support, et cetera, money that the county and the state has to help support rent and food, in addition to having Social Security. How do you afford staff support necessary? I believe, all need staff. I need staff because I'm not a mechanical person. So when my car breaks down, I call my brother, who's a mechanical engineer. And so we all need somebody to kind of be a mentor, to be somebody to talk to as well. And so they could be paid staff, they could be natural supports as well. So where do you want to live? Think about that. How will you pay for rent and food? How will you pay for the natural or paid supports that you need? So there's not one place to live, which is exciting. Just like when we choose to live, we can buy a house, we can rent a house, we can live in an apartment, we can live with a friend, we can live in a condominium, we could live in co-housing, we could live in all these different places. So a short continuum is licensed housing. It's standard, typical group home or community residential setting where the provider owns the property and employs the staff. There might be 2 to 4 people living in these licensed group homes or licensed settings, and so that's an option. Relatively recently, within the last couple of years, the state of Minnesota started to talk about something called Waiver Reimagined, and they introduced a new service called Integrated Community Support, which is kind of in the middle of a group home and living in your own home. Integrated Community Support is generally an apartment building that's owned by the provider, but you live in your own apartment. You can have a person, you choose who your roommate is going to be if you have a roommate, and the staff are in the building, kind of providing individual services to you as you need. And so that's kind of a nice hybrid option between a group home and living in your own home. We're going to talk quite a bit about participant-controlled housing or your own home. And that's where you can own a home, you can rent a home, you can own a condominium, you can rent an apartment. You choose if you have a housemate or not. You choose a provider of services. And with this option, you kind of have to have an agreement in place because it's not licensed, and the staff are licensed, but the home is not licensed. So the agreement about who's going to go shopping for groceries, is it going to be the staff? Is it going to be my parents? Is it going to be the am I going to go? Who's going to mow the lawn if I have to do that? Who's going to pick up the medications? All those kind of things have to be kind of written out so people understand what their role is. And it's pretty exciting because the services are separate from the place that I'm living in. So that's a good thing. So it's kind of a continuum, just a little taste of what's to come: licensed housing, other provider controlled housing, and participant controlled housing. So, like I said, we get to work with so many people. This is an example of two guys that that met, and they had common interests. They liked sports, they liked football, they liked to cook, they liked to hang out. And in this situation, the parents bought a home.
Hey, Jerry, we're gonna actually cover that when we get to that slide. This is just the
Okay.
overview of the housing. Sorry, I know you're looking at the pics there.
Okay,
This is just the overview of the housing options. Sorry.
all right, sounds good. So
Thanks.
just kind of what we talked about before, a variety of housing, living in your own home, apartments, condominiums, as well as group homes. Group homes could also be foster care, where it's a family foster care, or it could be something called life sharing, which is a relatively new option where we spend a lot of time matching the foster parents with the person that's living in the home. There's also institutional settings like intermediate care facilities for people with developmental disabilities. The difference is that they are required to have a nurse, they're required to have a dietitian. The nurse or the dietitian writes the menus. The menus are very specific with certain types of vitamins and things that need to be incorporated as well. They have to have a fire drill once a month, sometimes in the middle of the month, and sometimes during the day. They don't look necessarily like an institution from the outside, but just because of the heavy rules, they're considered to be institutional. Also, nursing homes could be an option, hopefully for a short-term stay while people recover or get better from a hospitalization or from an injury. But sometimes people live there long-term or longer term, and so there are some monies available to get people out. Also, co-housing is a great option too, where there might be a community of houses in a neighborhood and you're living as neighbors, as friends in a group, and each are kind of sharing some duties and having the benefits of living in a community as well. So, how do I afford the staff support necessary? These are just a small sample. There's pages of different types of staff support, but a common one is personal care attendant services. Another one that's coming up that has been approved federally, but it's not implemented yet. It's in the process this year, called Community First Services and Support, which is transitioning from PCA. It's a more flexible, self-directed option using the budget from personal care attendant services to hire and train staff to be the employer of the staff to set a rate within a range. If you just had medical assistance, adult rehabilitative mental health services are excellent services for helping people to problem solve, to get to appointments, to have somebody to talk to during the week as well. They can be really good. Home care nursing, if you require nursing for med administration or to pack your medications or to monitor your situation, that could be an option. Respite, a break for the primary caregiver, to give them a break so they can regenerate their batteries, so they can come back the next day stronger and provide those those supports needed. The last couple years, a new service called Housing Stabilization Services was implemented. It's paid through medical assistance, and it helps people find places to live and think about the funding that might be available for them long term. And life sharing, I already mentioned, where it's a foster care situation where people, we spend a lot of time matching the person to the foster parents so that it's a longer term match. So there's interest, there's common interest, there's liking each other, spending time with each other, those kinds of things. So life sharing can be kind of fun.
And we're going to get into some of those into the slides where we have, sorry, those definitions. So I think we got a little sidetracked.
So these are some more waivered services. Waiver means to waive the rules of medical assistance. You can have services in your home versus a hospital, a nursing home, or an intermediate care facility. Services in the person's home. We mentioned this already. Individualized home supports. Individualized home supports with and without training. with family training. Some of the new words that are a result of Waiver Reimagined are here as well. Some other services that are in a house, community residential services, kind of a group home, traditional group home for adults or children, and family residential services, kind of family foster care for adults and children. Shared living and natural supports. These are all options that you could access or find out more information about. Probably, it seems like yesterday, but probably 10, maybe 15 years ago, the state said, guess what? We're going to unbundle services. You don't have to live in the same license setting as you're getting services from. And that was a new idea then. But now it's rote and routine. And so participant controlled housing, or the person's own home, means that the services are separate from their home. They rent the home, they can own the home, they choose their housemate, the location, the provider, and the amount of services they're going to receive. You could have up to 24-hour services if that was needed. Other provider-controlled housing, apartment programs, and provider-owned and leased apartments or homes. People choosing the location and provider's choice of building and packages of services from the provider. And so there's a lot of flexibility. It's going back to the question, where do you want to live? Certain people do well with more staffing. Certain people do well with less staffing or more natural support. So it's really a plan for that person. You know your loved one the best and can help put the best situation better together for them.
So I'm having a little trouble as I'm typing. I'm losing the up. Okay.
Okay, I think we just did that. And then early on, Sue already went over this, where a person's own home isn't a program. It's not an open bed or a slot, kind of not person-centered language. It's not a model of development, but it is a choice. It's a process. It's a person. It's individualized. It's collaborative. It's the right supports at the right time. One thing that really bugs me when I work with people and some of the staff that say, well, you know, John, you need to learn how to make macaroni and cheese. And once you learn how to make macaroni and cheese, you can move. And so John tries to make macaroni and cheese for years and years, but he never learns. He can make macaroni and cheese in his new house, right? In his own apartment. He can work on that goal and put the supports in place wherever he lives. He doesn't have to live in the group home or wherever he doesn't want to live to learn how to make macaroni and cheese. So think about that in the future when you're meeting with a team of people, and give maybe some flexibility and work harder to make things happen. Work harder towards yes, I guess. I try to work harder towards yes.
Well, and I think it comes back to the person-centered plan. Again, the person-centered plan is the foundation that should drive the goals and objectives of the plan. It really should be happening before you're doing your Min Choices assessment, you know, or so that you're knowing those things and that's able to be carried through in now what they're going to call the support plan, not this community support plan and the CSSP. So we'll be talking more about all of that in the second workshop. But again, I always say to parents, it goes back to those person-centered needs.
Mm-hmm. It does.
So now,
found in front of their own homes.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, these are just kind of some of our past presenters that have allowed us to just kind of keep their stories so we can give you an overview of some of the models that we've covered. And one of the things we just found over the last few years, and I just knew when I was going through it, just to try to get my mind wrapped around kind of what did a day look like and kind of what some of this funding looked like. Again, it's going to look like a lot to some of you that might not be familiar with any of it, but it gives you an overview so that, again, when we go into workshop 2, we'll be covering the specific funding streams more in detail. So we don't expect you to know all the terminology, but we just thought it was a good way to look at kind of the model and a little bit about how it was funding and kind of give you the little story behind it. And this one, Jerry started to talk about, I know he's going to talk a little bit more. This is such a unique one. And I was just going to say the reason why I think this is cool is because Kevin, who is on the right there, his dad kept coming to the PACER workshops. And he was actually in our Fun Times group, which is one of the projects PACER runs. And kept saying, you know, I really want to get this going for Kevin. And eventually they ended up renovating a house down the street. And how they met this other roommate was really cool because they just happened to be acquaintances, and it was again for Special Olympics, but the moms really didn't know each other. And actually the one young man, Michael, was already in an apartment setting with a different provider, and it actually wasn't working out well. And what I think is so fascinating about it is because I have a young adult with autism with sensory needs and a lot of other issues that I think we have to be really mindful of when we're looking at, you know, the places we're going to, is that he was not doing well in the apartment setting. It was a little too small for him. And one of the main things that came up is that he needed to kind of see green grass and be able to walk out of his front door and be able to be out in the environment. And instead, he was kind of in an apartment where he was looking into another, you know, brick building. And just that feeling of being enclosed and the space issues was leading him to have a lot of behavioral issues. And so his mom had been looking for something different, and they just happened to be talking, and they both had two different providers. And so this was really early on when this was first starting to happen. So this was pretty cool. Jerry, I'm going to let you then take it up and tell a little bit more about how they worked it with the two providers in one home.
Sure. This was a really unique idea. Forever and ever, we had one provider per home, and the best practice right now is to have more than one provider, or each person has their own provider. So they were ahead of the curve. They worked it out so 1 week, one provider would provide the staffing for both of them, and the other week, another provider would provide the staffing for both of them, one informally, one formally. And then when they needed, there's kind of the odd part, when they needed to go someplace, bowling or whatever, that particular company would transport them to that event. So they'd have to have separate transportation, but they could have one staff working with them for most of the time. One of the guys loved to clean. He would clean every day if you let him, but we had to put together a schedule. So he would clean half of the time and the other guy would clean the other half of the time. So they worked it out. They watched football together. They had a great time. They were great housemates as well. So it's fun to see these success situations. There's a lot of numbers here, and as social workers, we don't like looking at numbers, but these are
But
some
we
examples.
need to know as parents,
We
Jerry and
do,
Susan
we
pushed for
do.
this.
I know it.
And
But
here we go, because like, again, what does SSI pay for? What are all these funding streams? What does it all mean,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
it's a nice way to get a handle on, this is kind of the budget, and with certain kinds of funding streams, whether you're in community residential settings or on your own. We're going to, again, dive into that specifically in workshop 2. So don't get wound up about it. Here we go. But this is about what it was costing them, and how they, again, the dad was the landlord, correct? Yes.
Right.
And
I
so
think they created a limited liability corporation, but the dad was a landlord. He was the one that organized it initially.
right. And so this was the rent, which is usually covered by SSI or SSDI. But they both paid. Same with food, the utility splits. We don't have to go through all that. There are going to be some tips we're going to talk about, because there's some nice funding for some of the utility programs and phones and internet. But and again, even the RSDI and some of that, I'm not going to get into all that. That's something we'll discuss more in workshop 2, but it does show that somebody with this income, you know, is able, this is kind of what he had with his income, working 4 days of work a week for 4 hours, bringing in that kind of pay. And again, depending on how much you make, that it can affect sometimes your housing support, which means your food that you might get. But here's his housing services. He was getting what they call individualized housing supports with training. There's a with and without training. He had some natural supports because he had his family down the road. Again, I think, again, they used a lot with assistive technology as well to be able to notify their parents. That's a whole nother discussion. And so this was kind of that total income and expenses and what was left to the individual. And then this next story, this was kind of cool. And we actually, his name is Bill Fox. We had him come back again. And actually, I think if you go to the 2021 workshop series and go to workshop 3. I really point parents to go back and look at some of these stories because this was a parent that bought a townhome for his young adult, and their roommate was a good friend, and that they have known forever, ever. So boy-girl roommates, and you know, they they did a little bit of work. Again, he's going to talk a lot about, you know, the types of things that are going to be involved with being a landlord. It is, you know, work and being able to do plan and budget for the repairs that might be needed like you would in any house. But again, I know recently when I checked up on them because of some of the staffing situation, I think it was really cool. And again, this was, I believe last year. They had, you know, there are people near to the college where some couple had just gotten married and they were looking to do work. They had done some work with the disability community. And so actually they ended up being live-in for the young adults that live there. I know they added a third roommate, but that was a pretty cool idea. And actually, as a result of that, he ended up doing a couple of other townhomes for some other families. So what he had learned there, he really wanted to pass on to other people. And then this is kind of their financial situation as well, getting SSI, sometimes again, getting a little bit of money from their job, and then the utilities. I know in this situation, the dad, they didn't feel like they needed to apply for food support. So, but they probably would have received a little bit. And then there's always some of these other expenses that people put in. But again, in this type of model, one of the main supports is the individualized housing supports with training, and then day support services to a program that he would go at Merrick. So they would do some center-based stuff, but then, you know, out in the community quite a bit as well.
And MSA stands for Minnesota Supplemental Aid. And we'll talk more about that, but
right. And this is a story that I love because it's a really cool story about a family that, again, they did get some funding, I think, to renovate a fourplex in St. Paul. And what I thought was cool about this story with Dan and Charlie is that I've got to remember whether it was Dan or Charlie. I'm sorry, this was so long ago, that had a grandparent that was aging, that had Alzheimer's. And so they were actually like on this bottom floor here in their apartment, and the guys were on the top. And so it was this really cool thing where they could go down and see grandpa and play chess and keep that connection and actually share some staff. And in the other building, I think it was one of the parents lived, and then in another section, they had, you know, a single mom with a young child that was living in that. And so again, they both were working in the community in various jobs, part-time. I know one was very into the Minnesota Twins. And I know they talked a lot about sharing those cooking responsibilities and, you know, doing a lot with crock pots. I remember that as well. And so this was kind of that financial situation at the time too, the income that they would get from their job. At this time too, I would mention, I know, I believe that was Dan who was nonverbal. And so, you know, he actually worked quite a bit with his parents, and again, with employment, to do customized employment. And that's a whole nother thing, you know, just having a couple of different jobs there, and then eventually providing that support, and then being able to go to natural supports in the employment agency once they kind of learn the tasks.
Mm-hmm.
But they think they were initially on CD, consumer directed community supports.
And these examples so far have all been people that are working. When you're a person that's not working, you're relying on Social Security, then the other rental assistance kinds of services like housing support and Minnesota Supplemental Aid housing assistance that we'll talk about contribute more towards your rent and food versus less.
Yeah, and then we'll be also talking about how a couple of these units were getting low income tax credits. to bring that cost down.
Mhm.
And this is one, again, that we featured a year ago with our group of parents that approached the developer Duran out in the West Metro. Again, a lot of them knew each other for a long time through Special Olympics and wanted to that question about somebody asking about, people who know each other, being able to form a group to have housing. Yes, absolutely. Looking at the state criteria, there's some issues with that we can discuss, and we're actually going to get into that in the third workshop. But Amanda and Jade are two individuals that of the other, I don't know how many parents again, that have secured some affordable housing with the Section 42 tax credits, and approached the developer to say, hey, we're a bunch of parents in the community, would you consider doing this? And they had never done it before, and they did. And then they got a provider on board to be able to look at servicing some of the people. Again, it's who the people chose as the provider, not necessarily they were forcing them to choose a provider. There's a big difference there, and there's rules around that. But anyway, this is a great example of the parents coming together and creating that community and beyond, and what they really wanted. And the update is, they have a new provider now, so they're going to be telling their story in the third workshop, which I think is really valuable. I think one of the cool things that, we've learned at Pacer is that we have these stories, and then it's so valuable to go back a couple years later and see what people have learned. And in this situation, again, this is Amanda's situation with the rent and how much that is for a 2-bedroom for them to split. Again, their utilities, and you can see some of them have phone, there's a Lifeline service, and then there's also energy assistance you might be able to apply for. But here are kind of these other numbers here. Their SSI, which is $943. Again, the food support, or what they call SNAP, and then the Minnesota Housing Supplement. So it's MSA and MSA Housing. Again, it's all sounding probably pretty complex to a lot of you, but we'll be getting into that in workshop. But you can see, and then this is a Minnesota supplement. I don't know what other states are doing that. This is what, half of SSI. So it's huge. It's huge to be able to, this can only go toward the housing. It can't go toward the services. Those are separate. And then you can see with, the new waivered services, how they're putting all these things together to meet the needs of the individual. So again, all these services, independent housing with and without training, 24 emergency assistance, home delivered meals, customized employment. The emergency assistance, Jerry, you want to comment? Just kind of, that's for kind of overnight supervision, right?
Right. It's a way to cover the overnight supervision. It could be sleep or awake overnight supervision. There was clarification recently, so that's a good option.
Right.
Also, they don't need to actually live there either. They could be available just in case we needed something. So it's an individual plan with each person.
Right. And then in this situation, as well as another one that we featured with another development out in Victoria, that the city applies, and they have a funding stream called the TIF funding. And so this was for City of Minnetonka, and it's a subsidy to the person that actually doesn't affect their benefits. So that's a really huge thing to be aware of as well. And so again, when we did the workshop a year ago, we featured Able-Lite, and we had a whole section on the real estate developer and the development out in Victoria. And so it's a great tape to watch if you want to know a little bit more about how some of that works. Let's see. Yeah, and this one I'll let you talk about. This is a cool one with
Sure.
the living caregiver.
Sam is a great guy. I met him several years ago, and I met his parents as well. They came to the trainings and they learned a lot of things. Sam's brother got married. Sam's sister moved out of the house, and Sam told his mom, Dad, when am I moving? And so that started the process. It's like, oh no. he wants to move. But Sam's a cool guy. He works at Carboni's Pizza. He has a girlfriend. He's on an intramural basketball team. He likes music. He had a garden when I was there. He gave me a yellow tomato, I remember, and I talked about that I have a garden too. And through the process of learning, he found his own home. It's in the perfect triangle between where his mom and dad live and where a set of relatives live and where another set of relatives live. He is so busy that we had to schedule time with him to have a little coffee one day just to kind of see how things are doing. So he has a live-in caregiver, the live-in caregiver, Devin. And Devin was found. His parents wanted the live-in caregiver not to be the boss, kind of the person-centered one-page description. Don't be the boss, be the peer, be the mentor, be the friend. And so Devin agreed to be that person, and it's been working out well for a long time. Sam was one of the people that when he did his person-centered plan, he did his path, he wanted to be a policeman. And so we kind of thought, oh, okay, you want to be a policeman. Okay. But somebody on the team knew that Minneapolis had a community liaison program. And so he participated in that, and he successfully completed the training. And so now he wears a uniform during the summer, and he could direct crowds, and he's in essence a policeman like he wants to be. His financial situation is a little bit different because he has a live-in caregiver. There's a waiver service called Caregiver Living Expenses that pays the staff's rent and food, and they pay them for the hours that they're providing support for Sam in this case. They need to provide at least 1 hour or as many hours as the budget would sustain. You could have other staff in there as well. So Sam and Devin's rent totally is $1,300. Their food totally is $500. Their electric is listed. Sam's income is $943. He gets some money from Supplemental Nutrition Program, SNAP. He has Minnesota Supplemental Aid and MSA Housing Assistance, which really helps out a lot. Imagine almost $500 in addition to his Social Security. The waiver services, the caregiver living expenses, pays for $900. They pay the staff's rent and food. So the waiver provider either sends a check to Sam to pay the landlord, or to the landlord, or to Devin to pay the landlord. There's not one way to do it. We just got to get the landlord paid. His family and friends in that perfect triangle of support are helping and assisting him whenever possible. At the end of the month, he has $782 left over. When you have MSA and MSA housing assistance, you get all the money left over at the end of the month, which is great. When you have housing support funds in a licensed setting, you get personal needs about, I don't know, $111, something around there. So there's a little bit different situation in a licensed setting. And Leslie and Kara.
Yeah, Leslie and Kara, again, known Leslie for a while, very involved with Pacer and in our Fun Times project, and Kara as well. And the interesting story again about this is that Kara was in a supported apartment program through one of the providers, which means that again, they had 8 to 10 apartments in a market rate building. So regular apartment rate, when provider has one apartment on site that might be like home base, so to speak, and that staff might be there, come in. Sometimes they have meals, or the staff will come to their individual apartments. And she had a roommate, and it just didn't work out very well with her. And again, I think some of the apartment setting and just that issue was a little too much for her. So then she was looking for more of that larger home environment, and ended up, being with Leslie here in an apartment that are in a, they call a community residential setting. Again, we're trying to get rid of the terminology of group home. So remember, so even that community residential setting, it's a mouthful. But that is kind of, we're trying not to perpetuate the group, and it's okay to live in a group if you choose to. So I don't want to say that this is bad as well. So, but in this situation, they choose to live together. And there's 2 other women that are living there as well. So there's 4, and that's usually the max for a licensed setting, unless you get permission to do the 5th person, correct? But typically,
that's correct. There's some exceptions.
4. Right. And in this case, again, could talk a little bit about what, community residential usually provides, Jerry, as far as
Well,
services.
usually, you have a guarantee of staffing, which is a little bit different than your own home, but the staff are guaranteed. They have the commitment to be there and provide the support necessary. With the housing support money that the community residential setting get, the money goes directly to the provider of services, not to the people, which is different than MSA housing assistance, which goes to the individual. That money provides 3 meals a day, toiletries, typical things you would need in a house as well. Other things, you can have a ratio. Common ratio is 2 staff to 4 people, or 1 staff to 3 people, or there's some situations with 1 staff to 1 person, but it's not as common. But
Right,
they
and then
also,
just
it's kind of a wraparound service. They coordinate the recreational leisure kinds of things. They provide transportation. They might have a van or a car as part of the arrangement, or the staff will be paid mileage if they use their own car.
Right.
So in this situation, they have housing support, which pays for their rent. In addition, their Social Security goes right to the provider. They don't get to keep it. The state adds $317 to their Social Security. The total housing support is $1,135. The person keeps $125. So they don't get to keep a lot, but they get all their meals paid, their transportation, their toiletries, all those kinds of things. So you have to kind of make an informed choice if you want to live there or live other places.
right. And then we were talking a little bit more about this again. Family residential is, some of the former language is the family foster care. But again, in this setting, in the community residential setting, it's usually the corporate agency that owns and leases the housing. And in this, it's the primary residence is the family, but they're also the primary caregiver as well. So they have the same rules to abide by as community residential settings. And then this other model, shared living, which is something we featured last year outside in the state of Hawaii, which was a shared living situation in Minnesota. We're going to feature a story in workshop number 3 about a young adult who is choosing this service. Again, this has been kind of popular in other states and has been kind of made its way into Minnesota. And again, in this model, life sharing is a relationship-based living arrangement that carefully matches an adult 18 or older who has a disability with the individual family who will share their life experiences. An individual or a family, I'm sorry, it's not just a family, to support the person using person-centered practices. And life sharing can include up to 2 adults who use disability waiver services and choose to live together as with an unrelated individual or family. The life sharing arrangement can't include more than 2 adults living in the same home. Currently, it's not a formal waivered service, and we will have more information on that. But the key about this is that there's an agency that really helps the matching process and is the person that really is the main oversight over the and provides those resources to the family who or the person that wants to be the life sharing individual.
And this is pretty exciting because that is my cousin Pierce, and we'll hear more about him at the 3rd session. He's sharing his personal story, and his family will share their personal story. Pierce has done a lot of cool things.
Yeah, it's really a cool story. And we are running late. I can see that now. And some of the things we kind of talked about earlier, but I think we were kind of using the summary slides and going into a little bit more detail, Jerry. So we're going to have to kind of fly through these to get to a couple of our other models and have some time to have some questions here. But you want to go over some other congregate settings.
Sure. We already talked about community residential setting. There's also less common options called board and lodge. We don't have a lot of people with developmental disabilities living in board and lodges. They just provide kind of the medication administration and some meals. Assisted living could be more the nursing home level of care, CADI waiver level of care. It's apartment programs, you have your own apartment, and then you maybe have a congregate dining, and you might have access to nursing or homemaker services, kind of a la carte. You order off of a menu. So these are different kinds of congregate settings. We talked about intermediate care facility before. It's the number is generally more than 5. Could be 100. There's not a maximum per se. It's about medically necessary services. So you have a nurse that's required to be a part of the program. You have a dietitian. The fire drills are there. 4 ounces of protein, a half a cup of starch, half a cup of vegetables. Very kind of prescriptive in nature for a 24-hour plan of care.
And again, with the home and community-based role, all these settings need to be kind of reviewed, and you've seen some of these settings be closed down, and then the providers have used those places to create other settings that are smaller.
Right. An interesting part of the ICF is that it's a federal program. So if you lived in Alaska, you could move to Minnesota and find an opening and move there, or vice versa. So nursing homes, we talked a little bit about that before as well. For short-term kind of people, cooperative housing, really cool things where you're living in a neighborhood, living in an association, living with people that you know, and you're maybe sharing a lifestyle, sharing maybe childcare, respite, maybe meals. Sometimes it's really up to you how close you get involved with your neighbors.
Yeah, and in this one, again, the cooperative members share in the corporation that owns or controls the buildings, and each shareholder is entitled to occupy a specific unit. They're also eligible for financial assistance or low-cost loans. And again, individuals interested in home ownership, but also the social benefits of the community might organize to form a cooperative. Members don't own their individual units, rather they own one share in the cooperative, and they have one vote at general membership meetings. And members sell their share back when they move out. Co-op members elect a board of directors, and the board might hire a property manager, others for needed services. And for more information, we have the link here to the National Association for Cooperatives. Co-housing, we're going to just look at a quick video here coming up. This is a growing movement. We featured a parent maybe 2-3 years ago that was interested in doing this for people in the ASD community, and presented on some of the research that she had done. But it does balance traditional ownership with the benefits of common facilities. And again, one of the things that you see with the way this has started is that it creates intentional and cross-generational communities. And I think that's the beauty of it, and also the opportunities for the planning, the design, and ongoing management. Here is the directory and some of the things that are happening in Minnesota. One of the active ones right now is the Twin Cities Co-Housing Network. I've got a real personal interest in this because I really believe in the movement itself and how it started out in Denmark. And again, Katie McCant is the person that's accredited to bringing co-housing in the United States. Again, it did start out in Denmark. And so I just want to go ahead and run that video, Jamie, on Katie here. She's actually consulting to the Twin Cities Co-Housing Network, as well as Grace Kim, who's done quite a few TED Talks on co-housing and the benefits of living with other people. And we're talking about loneliness. We're talking about social isolation. We're talking about why people want to create intentional communities, which is, places of belonging. So it's not all about just finding a place again. So Jamie, do you want to run this video? And we have this on our slide deck.
Katie McCament first learned about co-housing while studying architecture in Denmark. Inspired by the environmental and social sustainability that the housing model creates, she co-authored the book that introduced co-housing to the United States. She has been designing and developing co-housing communities ever since.
I don't know if that's because I'm showing
Your typical co-housing community starts by somebody has heard about this concept somewhere and it's like, wow, I'd really like to live in a neighborhood like that.
Do we want to pause
And
for a
then they
minute?
look around and there's nothing there in their region that they can buy into. So they start talking to friends. And out of that, you start to get some people interested in how do we...
Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know. if
I'm
it's-
sorry, I'm having trouble finding the correct share.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was because I was sharing my screen.
I stopped your sharing.
Okay,
1 second if I can figure this out.
okay, sorry, Brittany. But while he's doing that, again, with the co-housing, I think the interesting thing is that, you know, you have the shared common spaces, so you're each, again, owning your individual own unit, but the shared common spaces where people are coming together and they're actually working with designers and architects to do that. So if you look on the co-housing directory and look at some of the things that people are doing, it's pretty cool. And I think one of the things that stood out for me is that, you know, it's all people. So we have, because of, you know, the portability, we've got young people that are interested in it, as well as seniors, as well as retired people, as rather, there's just a wide variety. And Jamie, are we ready?
I believe so.
Okay, I will try it again
Katie
here.
McCament first learned about co-housing while studying architecture in Denmark. Inspired by the environmental and social sustainability that the housing model creates, she co-authored the book that introduced co-housing to the United States. She has been designing and developing co-housing communities ever since.
Your typical co-housing community starts by somebody has heard about this concept somewhere and it's like, wow, I'd really like to live in a neighborhood like that. And then they look around and there's nothing there in their region that they can buy into. So they start talking to friends. And out of that, you start to get some people interested in how do we actually create a neighborhood like this? Most communities don't start with 30 families. They start with 3 or 6. And that's who usually is the core group that gets the land under contract and gets the project off the ground. And then they're looking for other people who want to buy into that type of neighborhood and grow the community as they are moving themselves through the development process. There are now over 200 co-housing communities across North America. Some are rural, some are very urban. Probably most of them are in the suburban areas where most housing is built. But I think that's what's really exciting about the co-housing concept is you can adapt it to these very different situations. It may seem overwhelming, this idea that you could go out and start a neighborhood when you're not an architect or a developer. But here we've got 200 communities out there that were started just like that, where people started talking to other people and pooled talents, brought together a team to support them, and actually built a neighborhood that was more connected, uses a lot less water, a lot less resources. It's actually something you can do. Once you have land, you have a timeline and everything flips into high gear. Over the last 35 years of doing this work, we've actually learned a lot. We've learned a lot of best practices about how do you work in a collaborative real estate development world. What's the most important things for the consumers, the buyers group, the co-housers to do? How do they work with professionals, with professional developers, with architects, with banks? How do you structure the financing to get these projects built? How do you set it up so people can get competitive mortgages? So there's actually a lot of background now. We're not starting from scratch anymore. For someone who wants to explore co-housing today, there's actually a lot of resources across the country. There's our books, there's trainings, and there's the Co-Housing Association, which has a fabulous website. On that website, there's a directory of communities all across the country. So you can see what's available in your region. A lot of them give tours. You can go talk to people. You know, I'm a real believer that seeing is believing, so nothing like visiting an existing co-housing community to see what it's about and talk to people who live there. That's a great way to explore if this might be an option for you.
Thanks, Jamie. I think we'll end it here. So that is something to consider, and something that, again, going on the website to see who's in our area that you might want to connect with. I'm going to just wind it up here because I know we don't have a lot of time for questions already. Let's see. How do we? Perfect. We're back. Thanks, Jamie. So, and again, we'll go over this a little bit at workshop too. One of the things the state has done over many years is pulled together the HB 101 site. And, you know, they've connected various sites with this, but one of the things, again, there's places to find housing. There's places if you're at risk of losing your housing or you're homeless, for the coordinated entry system. The stabilization services we're going to talk more about. You don't necessarily have to have a case manager to get going if you're just looking for housing. And so that's another thing we're going to talk about. And then also, one of the newer features that they just developed is this housing guide for young people. And they've got some fantastic tools to get you started. And it really is aimed at this user group. There's videos, there's worksheets, and there's tools, including the Vault. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in workshop too, but I would go ahead and check this out. And then Jerry, again, when everybody, we do have a staffing shortage, and I know that things have changed with being able to find staff. And so this is one of the main resources that you're referring people to. And again, you can see how it's hooked up to Disability Hub, which is hooked up to the Housing Benefits 101 and disability benefits. We'll talk more about in workshop too, but
yeah, and that was more about staff, more about services and companies. Yep.
Right. And so being able to do some navigation here to fill in what exactly you're looking for, the names of some of the programs, and then looking at those providers that might provide those services. Anything else on that, Jerry?
The Vault basically is a place you can store your information and take it with you at a library or whatever. Then there's a partners section that you can see trainings that we've done years ago that are prevalent right now about what if I do, what if I have a unlawful detainer, what about my credit rating, all those kinds of topics as well.
Right. And then they've kind of got a blog going here too on what the latest is. But the Vault, again, not to get into a lot of detail, I would go ahead and start to check out the link on the, sorry, going back and forth here, the housing guide. It will explain a little bit about how you can create that and keep your information in one place so that people can access it, case managers and others that you will have on your housing team. So with that, I think we're going to wind it up here. We're going to take some questions, but you know, before we do that, again, we want to make sure that, you know, tonight it's really starting that conversation with your young adult about where they want to live when they grow up. You know, when's the time, as early as you want to. You know, just again, the big thing is planning that time to begin to learn about person thinking and planning with your young adult. And the big thing we've learned over many years is network. So this is when our next workshop will be. But, you know, before we go into that, I want to take some questions. I know sometimes people want to go through all the resources here. I know we are running about 10 minutes. So we will, many of these are going to be on the future resources as well. Again, here's our contact information and PACER's information on transition to life after high school. The Disability Hub, again, is a main place that we are referring to. Again, if there's specific questions that need to be clarified through policy, they can get that to the Department of Human Services. Here's some of the links for person-centered planning that we talked about that are on our website. I won't go through all these. Again, some of the main pages with these key links. And again, some of the other things with direct support professionals, you know, questions to ask when you're interviewing residential providers. Again, we're going to go through this in some of our other workshops, and also some of the other resources in the second workshop here. In fact, these are for the second. And I'll go for a quick plug here for the Goo Goo Dolls. This is our main fundraiser for the year. We had a whole year with COVID, and then we had something not long ago. And then this year we're having it in April. So we really, really encourage you to come. It's a great night to network and see all the people in the community and those beyond. Bring friends and family. If you want to know more, go ahead to our website. Again, some of the tickets are tax deductible. And it's just a really fun, just energizing evening. So, yeah, do we want to look at questions here? And I do see some, and I needed to clarify a couple as I went here. Let's see, I'm going to go all the way back here. Somebody asked Renee, a class for young adult with someone of their support team. I'm not sure what you meant about that. I don't know if you want to resend that. And then the other one, and again, I'm kind of, it's hard for me. So Fraser has a supported living model that again has people with disabilities. It is supported with HUD money. And somebody's asking if it's a hybrid type of living. And I kind of understand what they mean by that. But basically, the level of support that people are provided, I'd have to go back and look at their website because it's been a few years. Jerry, are you remembering again? Because if you go on Fraser's website, they specifically talk about the levels of care they provide, either in their community residential settings or supported apartment settings, but this is the different setting as well.
I mean, it would have to be one of those on the continuum, probably own home or community integrated community supports.
And that's what I wondered now with the new, and when we talk about integrated community supports, which we'll be talking about in the next. So basically, you might be able to talk about that, but what was kind of happening before, where you'd have a provider that would go into a market rate apartment building, and they would say to that landlord, we'd like to have 8 to 10 units, and we're going to have something on site like the one I talked about earlier. And they would have the lease with that landlord, but they would have to now be providing leases to individuals. So they actually hold that lease, correct? And then they have to have leases with each individual who is living in that apartment, in those various apartments.
Yep, and it's supposed to be a short-term lease, not forever, but for a while, with a
Right.
plan that goes back to the people eventually.
Right, but then they offered the services. Again, it should be based on the person's individualized plan. I think what we might find, or we hear sometimes, is it's kind of like there's an assumed level of care. So there's assumed level of independence and living in some of the integrated community supports. So like you don't
There
need
is.
24/7, you know, so go ahead.
Well, there is, but I mean, there's always exceptions, right? And so,
Right.
you just really have to present your case. It's a part of advocacy. With all the options, it does say up to 24-hour care, although it could be an exception and it might be hard to get and on and on. So with own home, that's clear. With community residential setting, that's clear. With integrated community supports, it's not as clear. People tend to be more independent to live in that apartment setting, controlled by the provider, with staff kind of roaming. It's a new option. We're learning a lot about it. It's through Waiver Reimagine. It's only been operating for about a year now. So we are still learning. The DHS has a community comment period, I think, coming up as well to provide some more information on what's working and what's not working.
Right. Let's see.
Hey, Susan and
Yeah.
Jerry, this is Sue. There's a
Yes.
really great question on here, particularly for Minnesota and states that other people might be participating from that have rural areas. What if natural supports and support networks are limited or non-existent? There is immediate family and not much else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the one that I talked about with looking at some of those other leisure recreation resources. I know, again, this might be something we need to get back to the person on. I know that I received a call several years ago from a parent that had a young adult with pretty significant level of care with autism kind of in crisis, and they didn't have anything in that area. And we did kind of have to reach out to the regional resource. So regional resource are people in the government that are under DHS that provide technical assistance to the counties. And so to reach out a little bit more to them to understand how those needs might be met for that individual. I hear we used to say you could call them directly because the link is under our rights page. However, it sounds like to me that they're trying to still kind of go through the disability hub to kind of get that information and then submit it to policy. But I mean, that was the guidance I just received not long ago when I had a parent that needed something from regional resource. We might send up some information, like if we see some systemic calls about an issue, PACER might, which we did this for some Moving Home Minnesota information that we sent up just to ask, around those calls, and then they had consulted their policy team and got back to us, and we had a conversation. So, anything, Jerry, that you might say to that?
Again, it's about networking, and it's really hard to talk about generally. It's easier if they want to just give me a call and we can brainstorm some things and talk about that more specifically. And we know people all over the state of Minnesota, various counties, lead agencies have housing contacts that might have other resources. Sometimes advocacy groups can be a good place to start because they're all parents and people that have worked with people with disabilities before. So reach out and give me a call and we can talk about it more individually.
Somebody's asking if there's like a hub that would have comparable resources for other states. I do not know that answer. I just know that just watching this materialize again, I would say, PACER really got started with some of this 21 years ago. And at that time, I know, our site and some of the others were kind of some of the leads for that. And then as DHS has really rolled out all their services and HB 101 and have built that, and now especially with this guide for young adults, so a lot of that has gone, toward the state to assist with that. So boy, I wouldn't know. Again, you'd have to be going to your social services or those links at nationally. I don't know.
I would check on the Centers for Independent Living, other PACERs, other ARCs. They tend to have a regional presence, and these organizations are people that are interested in disability and often are related to or have family members and really know firsthand what the resources are. So that's what I do when people are moving to other states. I call those regional centers and I say, who can we get these people connected with? How can we get started?
Yeah, and Centers for Independent Living are mandated by law. So there's our Centers for Independent in each state and in other regions. So somebody's asking how they can find a formal person-centered planning facilitator. There is a list on PACER that leads to the state. That'll go to the state website. We've been talking about whether that's totally updated or not, but it does give those.
It's a place to start.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. Plus, the nice thing also is there's a good questionnaire to ask, because planners have varying levels of experience, and some are connected with the international planning community, which it's just fantastic, that community and the supports and what they do for ongoing training. So
right, if you have a waiver, it's paid for under family training and counseling. Some counties like Hennepin offer money for person-centered planning if you don't have a waiver. Dakota County does it as well.
We'll be having that sheet up on the second workshop. And then somebody did clarify that they wondered if there was classes for person-centered planning for young adults.
There are. University of Minnesota Institute on Community Integration would be a good place to start. And there's all kinds of networks of planning happening.
Well, the other things too with some of the self-advocacy organizations, Olmsted again has their Olmsted Academy. There's advocating for change, right? And then ARC also has their self-advocacy Facebook group that Katie runs that you could get on and stay connected to, and especially with all the legislative
Mhm.
issues as well. Those people have been, some of the leads there have still been there for a long time and recruiting and telling their stories.
Right, stepping into action from Reach for Resources. There's lots of them. Even day programs have some self-advocacy groups to help administer the program.
Yeah. Renee, we'll get back to you. It said you said that too fast, but we're going to have to wind it up now. We're right after 9. And again, we appreciate you all coming here. We're hoping that this, gives you, it's a lot to digest, but we try to give a wide variety so you can go back and look. And again, we'll be reiterating some of the information in the upcoming workshops, and we will see you in 2 weeks from today. And thank you again to Jerry and also to Sue and Jamie for supporting us throughout tonight.
Okay, if that's